The Israel-Gaza war is now entering into its 12th week. Hamas says that the death toll in the Gaza Strip has now crossed the 21,000 mark, and the Western allies of Israel are pressing hard for an immediate ceasefire. But the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty adamant, saying that he will not stop until, according to him, Hamas is wiped out. But again, the theatre of conflict, remember, is expanding. On the one hand, there are the Houthis. On the other, Hezbollah poses a threat. Now, earlier in the day today, the Israeli military had intercepted a drone that reportedly had crossed from Lebanon or the northern part of Israel. On Wednesday, a drone had in fact crashed into the Golan Heights. Now, Israel has traded heavy cross-border fire with the Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon since the war in Gaza broke out. It's also warned of stepping up military action if the group's militants do not withdraw from the border. Now, the Houthis say that they are targeting Israel and the Israeli-linked vessels to push for a stop to the offensive in the Gaza Strip, where Israel is battling Hamas. On Tuesday, the U.S. military forces shot down about 12 attack drones, 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles and also 2 land attack cruise missiles in the southern Red Sea that had been fired by the Houthis over a 10-hour period. The Yemen's proximity and stranglehold over the key Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea has made it difficult for ships and tankers to pass through safely. Now, the attacks have prompted shipping companies to reroute their vessels around the southern tip of Africa earlier in the month, a longer and a more expensive trip than the Red Sea route that links up with the Suez Canal. Now, the Israeli defense minister has said that the country is now facing attacks in 7 separate theatres amidst the war in Gaza. Now, according to Benny Gantz, IDF has already responded and has acted in at least about 6 of these theatres.
We are in a multi-arena war. We are being attacked from 7 different sectors. We have already responded and taken action of these sectors.
Meanwhile, Israel's relentless air and artillery strikes and house-to-house fighting has devastated much of northern Gaza. The French President Emmanuel Macron has reportedly spoken with the Israeli Prime Minister and has called for a lasting ceasefire, voicing the deepest concerns at the very heavy civilian toll. The US too has been pushing Israel to ensure that civilians are not targeted. And amidst the clamor for a ceasefire, the Israeli military has said that the war will go on for many more months to come. But internally, there is growing dissent against the Israeli Prime Minister. A new poll by the Israel Democracy Institute shows that nearly about 39% of the voters who voted for Netanyahu's Likud party will do so again, but the others would not. All right, now to give us more insights into this, we're being joined by Mr. Elijah Magnier, who is a veteran war correspondent and also an analyst, and he's joining us live from Brussels on the broadcast. Now, Mr. Magnier, this is a pretty critical moment in this war. The war has gone on for well over 2.5 months. Pretty much 3/4 of the Gaza Strip has been completely devastated, but the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says that he will continue until Hamas is wiped out. Do you think that's a realistic objective for the Israeli Prime Minister to set?
Not at all. It is not a realistic objective. This is what Israeli former Prime Minister Ehud Barak said, that Hamas is an ideology, therefore it cannot be defeated. Most Israeli officials and military, ex-military and intelligence services in Israel understand that this objective cannot be met unless Israel had the intention to kill the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, because Hamas is part of the society and it is supported by the society in Gaza. Therefore, this is not an objective that Israel can meet, and this is why the Israelis are failing in this war to achieve their objectives, because the second objective is to free all the prisoners, and we have seen after almost 80 days of war, not one prisoner has been freed military means.
You know, I think that's an important point that you brought up. And also we saw images from within the Israeli parliament when Netanyahu was addressing the Knesset. He was heckled and booed by the family members of the Israeli hostages who are in the custody of Hamas. Now, Netanyahu seems to be losing support within the Israeli society. Do you think Netanyahu is in fact fighting this war now to protect himself politically?
Spot on, because this has become a personal war for Benjamin Netanyahu. Because, first of all, even before the war, the Israeli society was standing against his right-wing government due to the changes that he has introduced, crippling the justice system. Secondly, the 7th of October happened under his watch and the watch of the intelligence services that he has appointed. Thirdly, because his army has managed to kill some of the Israeli prisoners who managed to release themselves and free themselves in Gaza because of the rule of engagement that the politicians gave to the Israeli army.
Right.
Therefore, Netanyahu understands that he is coming to the end of his term the day he announced the end of the war.
And also, the interesting statement that was made by the French President Emmanuel Macron, where he called for a lasting ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Now, we remember that Emmanuel Macron was one of the very first world leaders who called up Netanyahu and expressed French support and solidarity with Israel in the immediate aftermath of the attack that took place on the 7th of October. But the longer this war seems to drag on, it appears that Netanyahu seems to be losing international allies.
It is true that Netanyahu is losing international allies. However, the weight that France or other European countries have over Israel is very shallow. The only country that can stop Israel at the United Nations is the United States of America. So far, the Americans have used the veto against the ceasefire, notwithstanding the decision of all the other countries around the world, 154, and at the UN Security Council, there were 13 out of 15 who decided that it is important to stop the war. Only Britain abstained, but the United States stood against. So France and Europe don't really have the weight sufficient enough to influence Netanyahu and tell him, well, stop the war and perhaps you will go to jail because you haven't achieved anything and you have failed, or you continue. And he's continuing the war.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Magnier, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
My pleasure.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.